Day in the life of a new real estate broker. I remember when I first started out, I was working directly under one of the partners. He had a handful of new listings that I got to work on. Now, any of the deal negotiation side to it, I didn't really work on. I just listened into those phone calls. But what I found most beneficial in those first 30, 60, 90 days was building out prospect lists. It was a time for me that there was no wrong answer for the most part. You had these listings, you were able to kind of run wild with building out this prospect list of every single tenant that you thought would work well within this center. Though maybe, the square footage didn't work, maybe the base rent didn't work, maybe they weren't even active. It didn't matter. It was an opportunity for you to get creative and build out this list. So if you think about it, if you're able to build out a list of 250, 300 prospects, you now have every single use category outlined. You have all these local businesses, national businesses, regional businesses. You now have written out, owners' names, local brokers' names, real estate directors' names. You now have compiled this amazing list. Though maybe only 10% of it actually makes sense for that listing in the beginning, you've done a lot of work that will only benefit you down the road. This was hands down the most beneficial thing to me. The other thing within those first 30, 60, 90 days that I think is so important that a lot of people don't do is you got to go drive markets. You might be from around the market that you're working in, and I grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs, so I knew each one of the markets, but I never looked at it with a retail broker's lens. So now going out to these markets and sitting and looking at a lot of these shopping centers, I would sit in a shopping center for 30 minutes. What cars are coming in there? Who's the demographic? Who are the co-tenants? These are all so many important things. Is that a signalized intersection? What are the car counts? Does the shopping center sit back off the road? These are all things that I kind of started taking notes on, and it wasn't overnight that you just drive a market and you understand it. It really takes a lot of time of just repetitive driving, and also too, and then you start looking at the correlation between different centers and the same population demographic types. You start looking at co-tenancy, and one center might have a certain anchored grocer with these co-tenants, and then you go drive an hour in the opposite direction and you see the same grocery anchored center with some similar co-tenants. So that way when you get a listing that might have that anchored tenant, boom, right away it's in your head. Wow, I know these other brands work really well or like to coexist with that anchor. So these are all things that you just kind of put together over time. But really those first 30, 60, 90 days, I think what's most beneficial is taking the time to do the old school, build out these prospect lists, all the different use categories, take the time filling in who all the contacts are. And then on the flip side is go drive markets, drive, and drive some more. And just make sure you're taking notes throughout that whole entire time.